Good morning. We are on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, and yes, my camera is deliberately put on an angle so you can look at the gorgeous, gorgeous waters in Haifa, Eretz Yisrael. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. Okay. So we had a Mishnah. We had a Mishnah which spoke about a Safek Eruv, an Eruv where there was a doubt as to what the status of the Eruv was, and then we contrasted that Mishnah in our questioning of Rameir when it came to Tuma, when it came to a person questionably immersing, and we focused on Rameir until now, and now we're going to change our focus and focus on Rav Yossi. So in our Mishnah, Rav Yossi said a Safek Eruv is a good Eruv, and when there's a doubt about the status of the Eruv, we assume that it was a good Eruv. However, what we didn't focus on yet was that when we quoted that Mishnah to ask a question on Rameir, we could have also asked a question on Rav Yossi, because in the Mishnah about a mikvah, about a person using a mikvah, and there was some doubt about the validity of the immersion. There, the Mishnah said that there Rav Yossi said we're going to be stringent, we're going to treat it as tamei. So there's a bit of a contradiction over here. In one case there is a safek when there was a doubt, and Rav Yossi is being lenient in the other, i.e. the Erev case, and then you have the case of tuma, of impurity, where you have a doubt and Rav Yossi is being machmir. So as you can imagine, the Gemara is ultimately going to try to distinguish between Erev and tuma. So let's see how it does that. So again, 36a1 lamed vav amud aleph. Kash Rav Yossi, we have a contradiction between the two statements of Rav Yossi. Am Rav Huna bar Chinana so he answers that although we're talking about tuma, which is rabbinic, in the Mishnah itself, it said that Rav Yossi said even if it's rabbinic tuma, still we're going to be stringent. So he says that even though Tuma itself, this particular case of Tuma is rabbinic, the root, the concept itself is rooted in a biblical concept called Tuma, called impurity, and therefore, although we're talking about something which is rabbinic, it's rooted in a biblical space, and therefore we're going to be more stringent. Whereas Eruvin, clearly the implication is that it is rabbinic, as the Gemara, Shabbos nami d'oraisahi, but then the Shabbos is also biblical, and the laws of Tchum, the Gemara is asking, are also biblical, because we just established in our line of questioning for a mayor, that Tchumin are Oraisa. So Gemara answers, as you probably assumed, because Rav Yossi Tchum and Durabanan. Rav Yossi holds that Tchum, that the halachos, when it comes to a place, going beyond your boundary, that is something completely rabbinic and not biblical at all. And therefore, we understand Rav Yossi in the case of Tuma, even rabbinic Tuma, he's going to be more stringent because Tuma is rooted in a biblical space, and therefore, overall, we're going to be more stringent. And whereas when it comes to Eruvin, which is completely rabbinic, Rav Yossi is going to be lenient. Okay, another Gemara gives another answer. Bibai Sema, alternatively, you could say Hadidei, that the ruling about immersion, that is his ruling. Rav Yossi himself, you were to ask Rav Yossi, what is the halacha when it comes to a safek? Rav Yossi, whether it's Eruvin or Tuma, he would be stringent. Hadirabe, in our Mishnah, he was quoting his teacher, Daikanami, Diktani. You could also prove this. It's actually inferred from the Mishnah itself, because if you remember from a few days ago, Rav Yossi, the quote from Mishnah was, Rav Yossi said, Avtomis, hey, Mishum Chamisha Zekenim, Shesfek Erev Kasher. Rav Yossi said from Avtomis, who quoted the name of 5 elders, that a doubtful Erev is valid. Shema Mina, we see from there that he wasn't saying his own opinion, he was quoting someone else's opinion. Okay, so there he's quoting someone else's opinion, and regarding someone else's opinion, his teacher's opinion, he's going to be, his teacher's opinion was lenient, but he himself, if you would ask Rav Yossi, he would be stringent, and in the laws of Tuma, that's where we found Rav Yossi's true personal opinion. Rav Amar, a third answer, Hasam Hanatam to Rav Yossi, in the case of Tuma, in the case of impurity, the reason Rav Yossi is strict is because Hamei Tamei al Chazkaso ve'em lo tava. There's a concept of chazaka. We keep on flirting with this idea of chazaka. In Masechah Shabbos, we didn't deal with it so much. Let's analyze it a little bit further. The idea of a chazaka is status quo. That means that if there's something there, then we assume that is the case until proven otherwise, right? So, and we use chazakas. By the way, it's not just like this Talmudic concept. We're constantly using chazakas, right? If I were to ask you, is your spouse, child, parent, whatever, someone that you know, are they, someone who, as far as you know, is alive? Are they alive? Well, did you see them right? And you say yes. How do you know? Did you see them right now? Are they with you in this room? No. The answer is that there's a chazaka. We go with status quos. If something was true yesterday, we assume until proven otherwise that it's typically the case. That's the idea of chazaka. So it says Rav Yossi, when it comes to the Tamei item, we have what's going on. We have a person who is impure, and that's their status right now. We're trying to change that status, but you have a case of a doubt. So there you say, maintain the status quo. The status quo is the person is Tamei. And therefore, going with the status quo of the person being impure, we should assume the person did not become Tamei. Whereas when it came to an Eruv, there is no, So in the case of Tuma, we say go with the status quo, and therefore we're going to say there's Tuma. With the Eruv, we don't have that same sense of status quo, and therefore we are going to be lenient in that case. So that's really the distinction. It's not so much about Tumah versus something else, whereas, which was the first answer. It's more about the fact that in this case we're dealing with someone who's impure, and we say keep the status quo, and therefore in a case of doubt, we have to default to the assumption of what was before. Ask the Gemara, Adraba, Hamin Mikval Chaskasu V'Lo Chaser. Okay, but there's another way of looking at this. You looked at one status quo. The status quo was the status quo of the Tameh item. Okay, but there's also another status quo, which is the status quo of the mikvah. You went into a mikvah, and it's a kosher mikvah. So the only reason you're going to say it's not a good immersion is because the mikvah was not good. What do you mean? What about the chazaka of the mikvah? What about that status quo? So the Gemara says, the mikvah shelo nimdad, we're talking about a mikvah which wasn't previously measured. So it never had a full-fledged status quo. We can make an assumption. It was a kosher mikvah. We never had a full-fledged status quo. Okay, and that's the third answer over here. The Gemara now goes a little bit further into which cases Rav Yossi is going to validate a doubtful Eruv. Okay, so again, those are the three answers, trying to reconcile the two Rav Yossis. One was a focus on contrasting Eruv to mikvah, to Tumah. One was saying it was one was Rav Yossi, one was his teacher, and the third answer was saying that the unique case why he's strict. In general, he is lenient when it comes to a case of a doubt, but in the case where there is a previous standing, chazaka, previous standing status quo, he goes with the status quo. Okay, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Ketzad, Rav Yossi Savik Eruv Kasher. In what cases do Rav Yossi say the doubtful Eruv is valid? And we're going to see it's not all cases. So it says in Gemara, Eruv b'truma, person made an Eruv with truma, Savik mod yom nitmes, Savik michashecha nitmes. We're not sure if it became tamei while it's still day or became tamei after dark, right? That's the case, right? So there, as we'll see, he's going to be lenient. We're not sure if it became tamei before dark or after dark, so they were going to be lenient. Similarly with fruits that are tevel, right, fruits which meisters were not taken off, we're not sure if they were remedied, meaning the person took off the trumos and meisters, did the proper tithes before while it's still day, or maybe they were done after dark, in which case it would be food which was invalid when Shabbos began, and therefore not a good Eruv. Zehus fake Eruv kasher, those are the cases where Rav Yossi says it's kosher. Aval, however, Eruv b'truma, person made an Eruv with truma, Safik Torah, Safik Tmeah, and there is doubt whether it is tahar or tamei when it was placed. In other words, as opposed to the first case, we said a person it was definitely tahar, and then it became tamei. The question is when. That's case is kasher. But in a case where it's truma, we never knew if it was tahar or tamei. Then v'chem pair similarly with fruit, safik nisknu, safik lenisknu. We're not sure if it was remedied or not remedied. Ein zes fake eruv kasher. That is not the case where he says it's kosher. In those cases, again, you have cases where we're not sure what the status is to begin with. That's where he is not going to validate. He's going to invalidate those cases. So by the way, what do you see from here? So this really does seem to support the position of, well, the way it's spoken, it sounds a lot like Rava, because the focus seems to be about the chazaka, about the status quo. In the first cases, there was a status quo, and we're maintaining the status quo. Status quo was truma, it was tahar. So you keep the status quo. When it comes to, and therefore you assume they became tamei, it became invalid at the latest possible time. When it comes to a case where I'm not even sure if it was ever tahar or tamei, that's just a general suffix. That's not a status quo, and therefore Rav Yossi is going to be stringent in that case. But ask the Gemara, there's a problem over here. Ma'ishna truma, why is it in the case of truma that we're not sure when it became tamei? Why do we treat it as tahar? And we say it's good eruv. Damar hamei truma chazkaso. We put the truma on its chazaka, ve'ema tahor hi, and we say it was tahar at the twilight period, right? And so the Gemara asks, Peros nami, when it comes to fruit, in the first set of cases, which Rav Yossi said those are kosher cases, good Eruvin. One was a case where there was a truma, and we don't know when it became tamei. So it was good, and we maintain the status quo of being tahar. We don't know when it became tamei. We assume it happened later, and therefore it's a good eruv. With the peros, what was the case with the fruits, the produce? The case was we know that it was tevel. We know that it was untithe, therefore invalid, and then we don't know when it became valid. So if you maintain the status quo, says the Gemara, so maintain the chazaka, the status quo, and then assume that it did not change before nightfall. In other words, if the focus is chazaka, if the focus is maintaining status quo, and that is the view of Rav Yossi, it's all about maintaining the status quo, then why? So by the truma that was once tahar, we assume at the latest pot, so we assume it was tahar until otherwise notified, and therefore the eruv is going to be kosher. But when it comes to the fruit is it's not good fruit, and so if you maintain the status quo, then it's going to be further, not good fruit, right? So the Gemara says, you're right. Lo tema safek mibod yom niskanu. Don't say maybe they're remedied while it's still day. Aleima safek mibod yom nidmu safek mishechashecha nidmu. It's the opposite. It was good fruit. It was good fruit. You know, the trumos, the meisters were taken, but then it became. It was mixed in. It was mixed into things which the tithes were not taken. Okay, this comes up in a number of Gemaras. You have fruit. my mango over here, which was, all the tithes were taken. And then what happens is I go ahead and all this stuff in here was not tithe. And by mistake, it gets mixed in. Now it's mixed in. I don't know which one was which. So now we have something now becomes invalid. Is that a word? It's not invalid. It becomes like undone with its validity. Okay, bottom line is, the Gemara is saying, the status quo is, my mango was initially kosher. My mango was good. It was good. It was excellent mango, by the way. It was excellent. It was kosher. It was all the tithes were taken, because I took it from a different bag, and it was all tithe. And then by mistake, it falls into my bag of things which are not tithed, right? Not tithed, and therefore, now it is undoing the previous status quo. So now we understand why Rav Yossi said it's kosher, and now we've answered that question. Okay, now we have a couple of queries, a couple of questions. Bar Rav Shmuel, Bar Rav Yitzchak, Mei Rav Huna. A person has two loaves of bread in front of them. One is tameh, one is tahar. And he says, I don't know which one is which, right? I know one of my things is good, one of my things I could eat, one of my things I can't eat, and I say, make my eruv be with the tahar loaf, whichever one it is. Mahu, what's the halacha? Tibal Rameir. We asked this question according to Rameir, who in our Mishnah was stringent. Tibal Rav Yossi. We asked this question according to Rav Yossi, who in our Mishnah was lenient. Okay, why? Tibal Rameir. Let's explain. Well, the question is, is it good according to Rameir? I can look at Rameir Hasam Deleka Tahora. In the earlier case, where Rameir said, we don't know if this food became tahar, became tameh, and he said we're going to be strict. But over here, right there was no tahar. Everyone knows there was no kosher food. I mean, there's no tahar food to use as an eruv. Hacha ha'ika tahora. But over here, there is certainly something right now which is a good eruv, and therefore maybe Rameir, although in the Mishnah's case where we don't know when the loaf became tameh, maybe in that case he's going to make it tameh. But in this case where we know for sure there is something tahar in front of us, there's for sure one valid loaf in front of us, even though I don't know which one it is. Maybe here he would say it's okay. Oh, Dilma, flip side, for the Rav Yossi, on the flip side, Rav Yossi, who is lenient in our Mishnah, because in the one there was one which was tahar, you knew which one it is, but you don't know which one it is, and therefore you could say that maybe since I don't know which one it is, I can never therefore go and access it, and therefore it's going to be invalid. So Amar Leir, Rav Huna answers, Ben Rav Yossi, Ben Rameir, Be'inan Suda Haruyim Bodium Veleka. The way to make it, what is the requirement for a good eruv is an eruv which could be eaten while it's still day. And over here you can't eat it, because since you have one which is good, one which is not good, you have a bona fide something in front of you. Imagine you had one piece of meat, two pieces of meat in front of you. One was pork and one was beef, and you don't know which one is which. Guess what? You can't eat either of them because you simply don't know. And therefore here too, you have to have something which you could theoretically access. You can't access this over here, and therefore it's not good. Further question. Mahu. Okay, so a person says like this, you're allowed to go ahead and I'm allowed to consecrate something. Consecrate something means I'm giving it over to the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, if I give it over to the Beis HaMikdash, I can't use it. I'm not allowed to use it anymore. So let's say I have something and I say this loaf of bread is, today it is chol, meaning which I could access it, and tomorrow, Shabbos, it's going to be consecrated. Okay? And then I say that loaf of bread, which I just said that about, I want that to be my eruv. Mao, Armalo, so Eruva eruv. He said it's a good eruv. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara further. Hayom kodesh l'machar chol. Let's do the opposite. I say today, the loaf of bread is going to be sacred. Okay, belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, and tomorrow it's going to be unconsecrated. Okay. However, he goes ahead. Basically what he does is he says tomorrow its value is going to go onto something else, and therefore this loaf of bread is going to be unconsecrated. And he says, make me an eruv this loaf. Ma, with the halacha? Amrle ein eruvo eruv. His eruv is not a valid eruv. Okay, so interesting, right? When he says it's good, it's chol today, it's mundane today, and kodesh tomorrow, then it's going to be a good eruv, says Rav Nachman. And on the flip side, when he says today it's going to be a holy eruv, the holy loaf, right? It's going to be consecrated, and tomorrow it's going to be, not consecrated, and then it's going to be an invalid eruv. Why is that? So Ma'ashna, what's the difference? Amar Rav Nachman explains. He says, "L'chi teichol le'kora demilcha." When you pay me by measuring out a quart of salt, I'll answer your question. We spoke about this phrase before. We don't have time right now to get into it. Hayom chol machar kodesh. Basically, it's just saying like, do something for me, and then I will answer the question. So he says, Hayom chol machar kodesh. Today this bread is unconsecrated, and tomorrow it should be consecrated. Sveika lo nachle kedusha. We have a doubt now. When did this thing become kodesh? Meaning, why is there a doubt? And let me explain the whole relevance of this. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the clock. I'm running out of time for myself. Right? We know that for an eruv to be good, it has to be valid. It has to be something I'm able to eat before Shabbos begins, right? Right before Shabbos begins, at the moment of going into Ben Hashmashos. So over here, when I said today and tomorrow, when does today and tomorrow, when does today end and tomorrow start, right? So there's that period of Ben Hashmashos, right? Which is a critical period. So over here, the person said today it's mundane, tomorrow it's going to be holy, right? So what we're wondering is, where Rav Nachman's responding is that when you said so when is the kedusha? When is the sanctity going to come on this thing? Well, it's sort of Shabbos already sort of began, so maybe it should start right now. And he says no, kedusha only comes in a place of definitiveness, not in a situation of doubts. Okay, there's a unique principle about making something holy. But if I'm making something holy, he says it only is going to come about in a way that is defined. There's absolute knowledge, and therefore I know for sure that by the end of twilight, it's for sure going to be holy. And therefore, what about the beginning of twilight? The answer is no, only at the end of twilight, and therefore the Erev is going to be valid because of the kedusha. The sanctity is only going to start at the end of twilight. Therefore, it was a good Erev when Shabbos began. Good, that's all I need, and therefore became sanctified on Shabbos, no problem. Hayom Kadosh L'Machar Chol, the flip side, if I say today it's going to be holy, and tomorrow it's going to be mundane, unconsecrated, then it's invalid. Why? The same way that sanctity doesn't come on something unless there's certainty, so too Kedusha doesn't leave something without certainty. So if today it is holy, and now I'm wondering, when did the holiness leave? Did it leave in the beginning of Binash Mashos, in which case it is going to be a good Erev, or did it leave at the end, in which case it's going to be a bad Erev because I wasn't able to have it? The answer is, it leaves the last possible moment, because when it comes to either bringing in Kedusha or taking Kedusha out, has to be done in a situation. It only comes about in a situation of definitiveness and not in a situation of doubt, and that explains the Mishnayos, the Rav Nachman's answers. Okay, we'll pick up, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.